Bro. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan, coming to you from my home, my apartment complex in the quarantine. Once again, this is not our normal studio setup. We will continue to be doing the social distancing policies until the ACA sees fit. But until then, I have another special guest tonight. It is Katy Montgomerie. Hello,
Hi.
Katy. What's going on?
I'm good, thanks. Also
Katy
social
is
distancing.
Yes, also social distancing all the way from the UK. So we're about as socially distant as you and I could probably get.
Also, I'm trapped in this green box. So.
Yes, trapped in the green box. For those of you listening from the audio, she's got the green screen behind her, and we're just having a good time, just talking here. And if you're watching this for the first time, because I know some of you are probably coming from Katy, this is Truth Wanted. This is a live call-in show that we do every single week, live on Fridays at 7 p.m. And this show is about what people believe and why. We kind of talk about beliefs. We talk about the reasons behind beliefs. We talk about conversations we've had with people about those beliefs. And that's kind of the main premise. Now, Katy, I'm going to tell you a story that happened this week before I introduce you, because it really made me mad, and I tweeted about it. And I was at a 7-Eleven the other day, and I'm wearing a mask for my work. And this guy comes up to me and he says, are you wearing that mask because your job is making you? And I was like, oh yeah, and he was just like, that's a shame. They shouldn't make healthy people wear masks. Like, healthy people shouldn't have to wear masks. And it's just like, okay, I guess like doctors shouldn't have to wear masks, right? Because they're healthy. Like I was just like, in that moment,
you can't patch it if you're already healthy. You can't get ill.
You can't get ill, I guess, right? Yeah, it's just I tried to tell him, look, it's like, it's you can be asymptomatic and still give the virus out, so it's just good to wear the mask. But he was just kind of ignoring. He was on something, not drugs or anything, but he just wanted to rant, I think, is what it was. So like, I'm encountering that kind of talk around right now. Are you experiencing that at all in the UK?
Oh, well, I'd like to add some kind of social interaction story, but I've pretty much not been out of the house for like 3 months. So I have walked past people on my daily walk. We have a thing called Clap for the NHS, which is where everyone goes out on the street at 8 p.m. on Thursday and like bangs pans together and like fires fireworks off in broad daylight.
I've heard about that, but don't they do it kind of at night? Like, isn't that like 8 o'clock?
It's at 8 p.m., so it's like pretty much broad daylight.
And
people are firing off fireworks and you can't see them. And the other day, I forgot that it was Thursday, and I just needed to do my walk, and I just left the house, and I like hadn't bothered getting ready. I just had like rubbish, whatever clothes didn't match. Hadn't done my hair, I was just tied up, and then all of a sudden everyone comes at the house and starts like cheering me as I'm walking down the street. It's like, what's going on? Oh yes, yes,
the cheering thing. Yeah, so the other day actually they had the Thunderbirds, the group that flies the planes and stuff through Austin. And I was driving home from work and everybody was outside looking up at the sky, and I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, are the UFOs that the Pentagon's been talking about? Like, is everybody seeing that? That was my first thought. All those documents being released lately, but yeah, just the Thunderbirds going by. So yeah, people be acting strange right now. It's definitely different times than usual.
It's a 5G, mate. It's a 5G.
Yeah, it's the 5G. Got to be the 5G, even though 5G coverage doesn't cover the areas where people are getting the virus. But it doesn't matter. Facts don't matter anymore. That's just
facts are for losers.
Not a thing. So Katy, you I would describe you as an LGBT activist. I think that is something that you're probably the most passionate about, at least from what I've seen from your Twitter. Would you say that's right?
I guess I'm an activist for LGBT people, as in I argue about that a lot, and that's stuff I do. But like, I kind of just see myself as just like a dickhead with Twitter who argue. Like, people say things that are wrong, and I can't not reply to it, and that's kind of like my sole motivation. But I mean, I am passionate about it, and I do care a lot about feminism in general, and particularly LGBT rights. But my top passion is thrash metal. So
yes, well, there's that too, and we were talking before the show. I was like, I really don't want to pigeonhole you here, so just stop me if I'm just saying anything. But yeah, like that's something that kind of stood out to me, because you actually just started a YouTube channel recently too, and so far it consists of makeup tutorials, and you doing covers of metal songs, which is great. But
also,
I was
we do have I did do so there's a thing called Trans Day of Visibility every year, which is a bit like International Women's Day. It's a similar thing, and I did like a monster 6-hour stream, which I've split up into parts, interviewing various trans people and parents of trans people and things. So
yes,
I started doing some activism stuff too. So.
Excellent. Yeah. See, and you got that activism stuff going on too on the channel, which is great. So I'm excited to see where that channel goes. By the way, she's at like 950 something subscribers. So Truth Wanted fans, if you want to bump her up to 1,000, during this or after the show, that'd be really awesome. But one of the reasons why I wanted you on this show, and callers, you can come call and talk to Katy about this too, is because I want to see when you're talking to people on Twitter, because I think Twitter seems to be the platform you communicate with people online the most. Like, what is your strategies when you're talking to people about these subjects? Because I feel like everybody I talk to, they talk to about different ways. Some people, they just want to put the facts out there and put people on blast. Some people like to have longer, drawn out conversations. Honestly, Twitter isn't the best platform for super long, drawn out conversations, but it's a platform people use, and people talk about crazy, deep topics that shouldn't be talked about on Twitter, but they do it anyway. So, like, when you're engaging with people, what does that look like?
I guess you kind of have to choose my strategy depending on like the situation. I mean, ideally, my goal for everyone is to, change their mind. And I know that no one changes their mind from a single Twitter conversation, but like to plant the seeds of changing the mind, and also to provide just a counter information. Because lots of the time, like, people can make up what they want about LGBT people, and people just believe it because they don't know a trans person, they don't know a gay person, they've just heard a rumor and they'll just eat it. And it's just good to have counter information out there. So that's like something I do often, like you say, just present the facts. But for a lot of people, they do want to ask questions, and everyone has their own kind of style of how they best learn. And I do try and find it. And there are some people who are just never going to, they're not there to learn. Then they're just there to like harass people or say their nonsense opinion or whatever. And for them, I want to provide counter information. But some people start off a bit combative and you can break through to them. And then I want to try and find like how they best learn, or how they're best like broken through to, I guess, and do that with them. But I guess the difficulty of Twitter is everything's super public, and there are people who are looking for you slipping up in order to like, cancel you or whatever. So like if I met someone at the pub and they came up to me and they said, I think all trans people are evil, and I'm like, well, it's like I'd rather you didn't do that, but I'll have this conversation, and maybe you're the kind of person who likes this kind of joke, or maybe you're the kind of person who just appreciates a list of numbers or whatever, but we can do it and no one's watching, and I can, it's very different to when it's in tweets, and sometimes I have to be a bit like robotic, because like maybe I would make this joke that's a bit like you need to catch the room for it, but the room is everyone on Twitter. So
it's funny because I'm the same way, in the sense, if somebody were to talk to me in real life, like I was willing to have a conversation with that guy I was telling about the story. I didn't get too deep into it with him because I had to get back to work. I wasn't in my free time. But if he had caught me, off work or something, I probably would have talked to him about it a bit more. I actually think it's easier to talk to strangers than it is to talk to people that I know in real life, or even on a platform like Twitter, because like Twitter, you can come back to Twitter. Like you can come find my profile and you can keep talking to me. You know what I mean? Like a stranger you meet on the street is like, you can't find me. You don't know who I am. You saw me one time. I could have told you a fake name or something, or not say a name at all. So
that is the worst thing about Twitter, is sometimes you're in a conversation and some random person shows up and they've got a screenshot of a tweet that you said from 3 years ago. And they're like, well, explain this.
Yeah, explain. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true though.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you
which
had
is very
caught
different to real
me,
life.
if you had caught me like maybe even 5 years ago about some of the things I said in real life, and you had recordings of that, I would say, yeah, you got me there. Like, but
At the
mostly
pub, definitely.
right. Well, it's mostly just because I've just changed so much in my opinions on things, and I can
Mm.
honestly say, like, yeah, that is something I felt differently on. Like, just it was just a few years ago, even when I was not as, let's say, woke. All right, like just to use an overused term about LGBT issues. I'm a cis white hetero male, and like my
Ugh.
experience, I did not have right. I didn't have like I didn't know enough people in my life personally to
For
understand the
sure, yeah.
experiences of what LGBT people have to go through, and I didn't understand what the big deal was. And now the issue is it isn't. Well, I mean, I can look at it on a philosophical level and stuff because I know what like common arguments and stuff like that. But on top of that, I have friends who are married and who are gay, and it's like, hey, those are my friends that I'm defending now. It's not
It
just
becomes more emotional.
yeah, it's not just an impersonal entity that I'm talking about. These are people that I know who share life with me, and then it becomes even more important then. So,
So,
it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say, if you don't have those experiences, that's going to be harder for you to kind of understand why it's important. I think that's why it was hard for me.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess on that, like, yeah, well, I feel like I definitely used to be just straight up transphobic and homophobic when I was like a teenager, 13 or whatever. And like you say, if people I mean, I never said anything. I was never actively saying anything or going out my way to do anything about it, but it's what I thought. And if you could have recorded my thoughts back then and then tried to cancel me over them now, then yeah, they would have been rubbish. And it is what kept me back from coming out for so long was that I just didn't know anything about it. So in the UK, we had this law called Section 28, which forbid school teachers and public institutions at all from discussing LGBT people. You weren't allowed to talk about them. And that was for like my whole schooling life. So my only knowledge of LGBT people was pretty much from American films. And in the 90s, particularly trans people, American films weren't particularly friendly. And I just thought, well, they're all losers in film, so they're all losers in real life, full stop, they're bad. Like that was pretty much the extent of my understanding.
Yeah.
And it took some internal rationalization and thinking about, particularly sexuality. You can just be like, well, I have this feeling for people. What if my feeling is different to someone else's feeling? You can rationalize that, but until you like meet people and just see, oh, they're normal. Like, what normal? Normal doesn't mean anything, but they're just a person I can be friends with, and there was literally nothing different about them at all as a person.
Yeah, there's nothing about those attractions that make them any different from you or me, except that they feel attractions differently. Like that's kind of how I think about it.
And yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's the same with trans stuff. Like, I think I personally understood sexuality sort of first and was like, well, gay people deserve the same rights as straight people, and bisexual people. There's fundamentally no different. And for trans people, I still had this kind of thing blocking me, like, they're bad or they're wrong or whatever, and just didn't really analyze it. And it took seeing trans people actually on YouTube, just talking and being normal, and I was just like, they're the same as everyone else. What? Like, why have I had this nonsense? And then that's what took me to confront my own sort of prejudice, and which is why another reason why I want to reply on Twitter is because, like, part of me is confronting information, part of me is answering questions, and part of me is just like, I'm a person.
Yeah, like part of I get personally involved with this again because it's like I remember what I used to be like, and I can relate to that, and I try to think about myself then and what I would have needed to hear in order to convince myself of this kind of stuff. I think, it's interesting in the United States, I think post 2015, when the Supreme Court kind of made a decision that all states have to be able to, allow people to marry who they want. Right. I think major politicians really haven't spoken too much against LGBT people. The T, of course, is a bit more troublesome, unfortunately. That there's still some stuff out there, but like I feel like it's not, because I feel like most major politicians realize, oh, this is suicide. There's no way you can kind of win this now, because the cultural shift has changed so much. I think if you look at it, political issues in the United States, if you look at abortion, if you look at gay marriage, if you look at, all these kinds of social issues, gay marriage has changed so much in people's opinions in the past like 20 years, and I think people have realized that now, that even if they still feel that prejudice, they're not going to say it as loud as much, but they may keep it cool. It's not cool, but that's the problem becomes almost that they still have that prejudice, but they don't say it out loud. And so, they're still holding on to these ideas, but now you don't even know who has those ideas and who doesn't, because they're not willing to talk about it. That's but on Twitter, people will say anything. That's the new battleground, I guess. It's just arguing with people on Twitter.
So like with regards to transphobia in the UK, I mean, if you talk to most trans people in the English speaking world, and you say the UK, they're like, it's the home of transphobia. Like, that's where it's all coming. I mean, the US is bad for transphobia. Everywhere's bad for transphobia to an extent. But who's producing all of the mainstream articles at the moment is the UK. But saying that, like, I receive transphobia literally every single day on Twitter, but in real life, I don't. And it's very different. Even though people are wanting to say it, and there are people thinking it, and there are people writing articles for certain newspapers, most people just don't care, or if they do care, they don't think that, like, they're like, well, this opinion, I know it's bullshit, and so I'm not going to say it at the pub.
It's not enough to bring up to people. For sure. But why do you think the UK in particular is faulty at this?
It's very difficult. I think there's a lot of complicated issues for why the UK has ended up like this. I think, like, particularly in contrast to America, you've got a very black and white, red, blue, whatever contrast, and I know it is more nuanced than that, but much more so than the UK. It's like you're either voting this way or you're voting this way, and if you vote this way, that means you support gay rights, it means you support abortion, it means you support blah 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 blah, and if you vote this way, it means you support these other things. And I'm British, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think that is a factor in it, and it means that people are kind of opposed to it traditionally. You've got the kind of religion angle as well, and the UK is much more mixed up, and there's much more like different angles, and it leaves more room. There's less sides. It's not like if you support abortion, you also support gay rights and you also support trans rights. The UK is more, oh, well, I support just this one, or I support all of them apart from this one. Which means it's more free for people to find their little transphobe clubs and all this
sort of single issue voter kind of mentality is what it is.
We have a proper cult of single issue voters who will happily vote for a party that's bad for their rights if it also dunks on trans rights. So that's been quite a big deal.
Interesting. I think the equivalent of the US would probably be, if I had to pick one single issue that people care about, probably abortion. And then maybe number 2 would be guns. I think, or one might supersede the other. I don't know. They tend to be in the same crowd anyway. But I think that's probably what I hear the most out of people who aren't super into politics, but they care about that one thing. Or they'll say something like free speech or something, which is like, I'm pretty sure both sides are for free speech, but some people just think one's more than the other. It's just kind of one of those things. But anyway, folks, we got one call in the queue right now that we're going to get to in just a second, but we can get some more calls in the queue. So if you want to talk to Katie or you want to talk to me, it doesn't have to be about LGBT stuff. That's kind of what we're talking about right now. But if you have something else you want to talk to about religion, about other kinds of beliefs, come and talk to us. Now, Katie, you got this new YouTube channel that you just got started, breaking away from the Twitter sphere a little bit. What are your plans for the channel? What do you want to do with it?
I'm thinking about that at the moment. I would quite like to present the arguments that I do on Twitter in like a longer form, because I type out the same arguments over and over on Twitter, and I've kind of honed them. And I'd quite like to just have some kind of, here's a 20-minute video that explains this one topic. I'd quite like to do that, but I'd also quite like. So I haven't managed to achieve this yet, but my goal would be to mix some kind of, this is a feminist position with Wayne's World. Like that would be my dream. So like some kind of like, yeah, you know, like completely nonsense. We're just going to play guitar. Here's like a stupid cutaway. And now here's a serious feminist issue. So
it's a bait and switch. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, so it'd be like, right. Anyway, so this is why abortion is important.
This is why I love it. That's great. You bring it in. It's like, oh, cool. It's a chick that can play guitar. That's rad. Whoa. Now I'm woke on feminist.
Exactly. Like, I just need to do a bit of like get them in the thumbnail with a bit of cleavage, and then be like, you actually really need to support gay marriage. So
actually, you should be. Yeah, that's great. That's that's so funny. I wish I don't have that advantage, obviously. So I good for you if yeah, that's how you want to pull people away.
We'll see. Like that would be like my dream crossover. I think do that, some kind of show thing, maybe sneak an insect fact in there as well, and it'd be good.
How does Wayne's World hold up in 2020? By the way,
I haven't watched it.
Isn't there a cross-dressing scene in there? I don't know. It's been
there might be. There probably is. I'm pretty sure that every single comedy from before 2015 is transphobic.
Isn't that awful that like, because okay, I really want to get into calls here, guys. I know you're waiting, but like, side note here, because this is an interesting thing, because people talk about this idea of like, oh, we can't, you know, people on the left or whatever, they say like, oh, well, we can't enjoy these movies anymore. We're trying to shut people down. It's just like, it's really not that. It's just kind of, for me anyway, it's a genuine reaction to looking at these older media. And it's like, oh, I can't relate to this joke the same way anymore, because that's now making fun of somebody I know, or that's something I'm like philosophically opposed to on something.
Yeah. Right? I mean, I guess as a trans person, you just have to deal with it. I mean, like all of my favorite shows and everything, all of them have some kind of bullshit transphobic joke in them. And you just know it's coming. Like, oh, it's going to be in one of the first few episodes, because it's always like the easiest thing. There's only 3 jokes against trans people. There's, I identify as attack helicopter.
Yeah, the attack helicopter.
If I had a penny for every gender, there was I'd have 2 pennies. And then the last one is, oh my god, she's got a penis, and that's it. That's literally the full repertoire since 1981 of transphobic jokes, and every single comedy has one of them. So,
and it's like the boring. First of all, it's 90% of the time it's a dude dressing up as presenting as
99.9%.
99.9, except for She's the Man. I think She's the Man is like the one exception that comes to mind. I don't know of any others, but like it's and I guess the idea is, oh, there should be humiliation in this, because this is a man who's choosing to present himself as feminine, and therefore that's not good. That's bad. Yeah, like
that's the full extent of the moral judgment here. Man doing women think women are bad, and he is a man, so he should not be.
He should not do the woman thing, because that is the man. And it's just like it's the same joke every single time.
Like in the UK, we've got a thing called Mrs. Brown's Boys, which is as bottom of the barrel possible comedy that you can get, and that's literally the entire premise. It's a man's wearing a dress. We've got 3 seasons.
I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, like, it's weird looking at it back now, because it's like, how will future people look at these movies? Like, if I had kids and they watch those movies, are they even going to find it funny at all? Are they even going to find any humor in it, just based on the way that they're going to grow up and the culture that they're going to grow up in? I don't know. It's interesting. Like, the only reason I care about a lot of these movies is because I grew up with them. If I watched them for the first time, I'd be like, whoa, you know, or if one of those kinds of movies came out tomorrow, I would be like way more out there. But like, I just understand that there was just a time and place where this was just commonplace.
Comedy does age badly. Like even Monty Python, which I love. Rewatching it's kind of like, it's just kind of rubbish.
And like, it's like, I only say I get it because like there was a time in my life where I thought that way. And like, so obviously other people are had to have thought that way. So I'm not going to blame
Yeah.
somebody who's since changed, who has since like realized that, you know, like you can't change the past, but it's like going forward, we just can't do comedy like that anymore. It seems like, you know?
I mean, I think that people often like to try and sell it as, oh, we're not allowed to, but it's not. It's just
Well,
it's
yeah,
not
it's-
funny. I'm not laughing.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do rubbish comedy, and the thing is that instead of laughing, I'm going to be like, this kind of lame.
Yeah, it's not like, again, yeah, I'm there's no law saying you can't do this stuff. It's just like,
Well,
there's
not in your country.
not in my country, but what's the benefit? You know, what's the benefit of having a comedy like that besides promoting hatred towards trans people? You know, like or whatever it is. Like the one I was thinking of. The one I was thinking of in particular was Talladega Nights. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but Talladega Nights was okay. But there's this whole scene about how these two guys are gay, and they, you know, like one of them gets a dog or something, and they live in the house, and I think one of them has like a lisp or something. And the whole joke is that they're gay. They find out that these two characters are gay, and everybody's just like, huh? You know, and it's just like, they're just gay, like they're not hurting anybody, like, and they're doing every single stereotype out of the book, you know.
Yeah. The worst one that I know of is Ace Ventura.
Oh yeah.
The ending for that. Like,
oh yeah.
Oh, the whole thing is she's evil because she's a trans woman. Oh, let's all throw up. Let's have a 10-minute scene of all the men throwing up.
Yeah, and so I dressed up as Ace Ventura a few years ago for Halloween, and then I watched that movie again, and I forgot that was a thing. I just totally forgot that was then there. So
it's double bad for me because it's also got Cannibal Corpse in, which are an amazing band. And all my metal friends are like, "Oh, it's got Cannibal Corpse in." I'm like, yeah, but it's also
got really bad humor in there for folks. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's get to some calls. Let's see what people want to talk to us about today. So I'm going over here, and the first I want to talk to was the this is Daniel calling in from Toronto, who's been online here, and Daniel says that he believes some people may have in fact have been abducted by aliens. This is a bit of a non sequitur from what we were going for, but I just had to jump right in. Daniel, you're on the air. What's going on?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. I called in. I was saying that I called into the Atheist Experience last Sunday. I talked to Matt and Shane, and they both Matt recommended that I call into this show with this subject.
Okay.
The reason
you call in, I guess that's all right. So go ahead.
Yeah, the reason I want to talk to Matt was because Matt, lots of times on the show, he talks about things like, you know, when people call in about Jesus resurrecting and from the tomb, and witnesses saying they saw him alive or something after the supposed crucifixion, right? And Matt always says, well, you don't believe people when they say they've been abducted by aliens. And I think it's a different subject. I think maybe some of them are telling the truth. Maybe I'm sure a lot of people are lying, and I'm sure a lot of people are mentally disturbed, whatever. And there may be other explanations. I don't know. There may be some explanation, like something of the brain that we just don't understand over the human mind. Mm-hmm. But another, I think, potential explanation is that what's happening is what they're saying is happening, that they are being abducted by aliens for whatever reason. I don't know. And the reason we don't know the reason it remains a mystery, why it can't be proven, is because the technology that these aliens have, they're so advanced that it looks like magic to us. And I quoted the Arthur C. Clarke's famous quote where he said, any sufficiently advanced technology will look like magic to us. And maybe that's what's happening. Maybe that's how they're floating through walls and they're floating up to the cross. Maybe because it's just some amazing technology. We just have no concept of how they're doing it, right?
So I have some thoughts on this, but Katie, I gotta get your take first. Aliens.
Okay.
Real or not? Yes or no?
I would be surprised if there wasn't some kind of other life in the universe. I think I think it's likely, in my vague idea, that there's some kind of life potentially, like bacteria, evolved life at some point in time, maybe not even now. But
about
yeah, but like
this.
abduction, like
Yeah.
I think the first thing to say is possibly, like, we can't say no. I guess my first question would be why? Like, if humans discovered if another race, we'd either try and kill them all or have sex with them all, and that's pretty much the only two options. Why would aliens show up, sneak around, abduct one random person from Texas? Like, they're never abducting. They're never showing up in, like, London. It's always some in the middle of the woods at 3 a.m. I don't know. It's just why would they do what they're doing?
So
I
do want to expand on that, Katie, because I think we can find a through line with, and this isn't true for all typical alien abductions, right? All of these kinds of stories, but they tend to be isolated incidents. They do tend to be, you can find some statistical through lines through a lot of these stories. They tend to come from people with, maybe they're not college educated. Maybe they do come from rural areas, and that's an interesting thing to look at. And also, as Daniel, it was great to point out, there's going to always be a confluence of influences that could factor into explanations as to why somebody could be experiencing an event like that, whether it's drugs, whether it's night terrors, whether it's dealing with kinds of anxiety or shared delusions. I think it's something that I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about. Is a few weeks ago I had Jordan from the Knowledge Fight podcast, and what he covers is a group called Project Camelot. And Project Camelot is literally this woman who interviews these people who believes they've interacted with aliens. Some of them say they're aliens themselves, but like, when you encounter that information online and you see, other people have these experiences, suddenly, like,
it's reinforcing.
Your take on that situation is going to be reinforced. That's why so many people believe in, like, the Pleiadians specifically, or the Greys. Like, you get these cultural ideas, and they tend to
it's myths. Like forming myths, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same, like the chupacabra. A lot of people think, the chupacabra is actually this ancient myth. It's not. It's this. It came from this woman in, like, Puerto Rico, I believe, from the 90s, who had saw, like, a sci-fi movie like a week before or something, and then attributed the features from that movie to that thing, and now other people started witnessing that with the same, because now it used to be something
it's in
different.
Your mind.
Yeah, and so that's just to your point, Daniel. We can't completely rule out the idea that somebody could be abducted by aliens, but we also have to look at kind of what's likely based on what we know. Because right now, I don't know if aliens could do all of that, because it just hasn't been demonstrated to me. Not to say that it can't happen. It's just I don't even have a probability factor to factor that into, because it's I don't have any experience with that.
It's as likely as any other thing. Like, there could be fairies, there could be, I mean, maybe you could argue it's more likely than something like God, because God is supernatural and aliens are natural.
Sure.
Arguably. But I mean, it's as likely.
Unless there's supernatural aliens, which some people have argued are a thing, but
yeah, for sure. But I mean, what? Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think, Daniel? What do you think?
I don't believe it's anything to do with supernatural. I just think that another thing I said to Matt, and I kind of walked into a logical fallacy quicksand when I said this. I said the universe is so immense. It's so, it's trillions of stars. And each of those stars is like at the center of a little solar system, isn't it? And they have planets around them. And with all these trillions and trillions of planets, I just think it's highly likely that life started and went through the same evolutionary process that we went through. Maybe they did it millions of years before us.
That's true. But I think there's, as well as there being trillions and trillions of stars, like, for sure, and that's kind of the point that I started with, is yes, we could say likely. If there's a 1 in a trillion chance that life evolves, then it's probably happened hundreds of times across the universe. But the universe is so big, unimaginably big, and also unimaginably old. And like, the human race has been around, capable of even thinking these thoughts for like no time at all. And we might go, we might peak as a civilization and die out. And in that time, even if we get light speed travel, we can still only travel a tiny, tiny percentage of the universe. And another species might be 1 billion light years away, and there's just absolutely no chance that they'll ever come into contact with us, even if they were super advanced, even if they could travel at the speed of light, even if they were peak of their civilization for a million years. It's just
they'd have to have done something different about our known laws of physics would have to be changed as well, because currently, from what we understand, we can't travel faster than the speed of light. If anything, we're going more and more distant from every star that we see. And so it's that adds some complications to it too. But the other thing with this is if you were, and the cool thing about the atheist community in particular, we're usually the first ones to say like, yeah, aliens, yeah, totally, that could be a thing. But like we just,
I'd love it.
Yeah, but we just tend not to just put too much stock into it, or at least most of us, I think, because alien abduction stories in particular are just notorious for just a confluence of different events, and also it's 90% of the time it boils down to personal experience, and it's just someone telling a story about their lives where they don't really have parts of a UFO or a selfie with them and an alien,
there's a brilliant, I think it's XKCD comic. So it's paraphrased. It's something like, in the last 10 years since the invention of the smartphone, we've effectively disproved aliens and ghosts, alien abductions and ghosts, because we are getting the same amount of reports per capita of both ghosts and aliens abductions, but we've not got any more evidence.
Actually, there's been more alien sightings and UFO sightings now than ever before. It's actually gone up. It's statistically gone up. But your point still kind of stands. Yeah,
that actually means that our sightings to evidence ratio has gone down.
Yeah, so to your credit, I think your point still stands, only because we have more people who can report that kind of thing now, and I think that's part of it. Like, if you were in a Latin American country or something and you saw some shit, you weren't gonna, I don't know, that's not. But now there's the internet and stuff, so that gets reported to different agencies and stuff like that. So
and like you say, with the cultural knowledge, there would have been whole groups of people who just didn't know what a UFO sighting was. And now you know about it, and you're like, oh, yeah, that thing the other day that I saw, that's a UFO. Right.
And again, as people point out before me, UFOs don't explicitly mean aliens either. Although the recent stuff I got, man, they keep putting out more shit about the fucking UFOs from the Pentagon. I don't think it's the Pentagon. I think it's another agency. I don't know where that's going to go. We haven't reached that point yet, but there's some weird stuff going on with that. I don't know why they just decided to release that now. It's probably drones
for the conspiracy theorists.
It just adds, I just can't imagine what those alien forums are like right now. They must be freaking out. But anyway, Daniel, go ahead.
I think it was the Pentagon that was. No, another thing I want you to think about is, if you think about our human history and our technology advancement, you think the last 2,000 years, we just go by the common era. And look how far we've come, especially when you come to the 20th century and you come to after World War II, and it just exponentially went up, our technology. And that's only that's just 2,000 years. I mean, we're still so young and primitive, I mean, what will the technology look like in 50 years from now? I won't be around to see it. Or what will technology look like in 100 years? And then think, what would it look like in 1,000,000 years? It would just be mind-boggling.
But maybe it's impossible for any species to last that long. I mean, potentially. Technology will get to. I mean, when we get to the point where we have super authoritarian potential and drones can kill people for thinking the wrong thoughts, there's this thing called Drake's equation, which is trying to explain why we haven't come across life. And there's
Fermi's paradox. Fermi's paradox.
They're the same, related, aren't they? It's there's some factor. There is a factor which, at least one of them, explains why we haven't encountered. And one of them is potentially no intelligent life can last long enough because it always destroys itself. Potentially.
Yeah, I'll say this, Daniel, and then I'll go ahead and try to get to the next caller here. But if we had to rank the hierarchy of potentially true beliefs, again, going back to this, ghosts, Bigfoot, God, whatever, aliens, they're on the top of the list for potential, because I think it's there. But in order to justify, for myself, to justify a belief in aliens, it has to be more than just the personal experiences of people in questionable circumstances. It's just the stories that I've personally seen are not enough to convince me. Maybe you've seen some stuff that I haven't, and I will fully concede that to you. But right now, as much as I've looked into it, and I'd say I probably looked into it more than the average person just because of the nature of what I do. But, it's hard for me to come to that conclusion that aliens must be a thing. I think it's very probable and very likely. And also, there's also a difference between me thinking that aliens are real and aliens have visited us and abducted us too.
I think I agree. It's like the chance of there being some other life somewhere in the universe is very likely, and the chance of there being alien abductions on Earth is like 0. I don't know. That's how I feel anyway.
Not as big on that.
No, I agree. I agree with both of you.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with both of you. It's just that Arthur C. Clarke quote. I mean, that's basically all I want to say.
I love that Arthur C. Clarke quote. It's great, and it makes and it really does speak to the fact. I read a book recently, *Sapiens* by Noah Yuval Harari, of just how far humans have come, even in the past 100 years, in the past 20 years, and you're right. Like we could definitely get to that point where that could be a reality. We're visiting other planets and stuff is a thing, and it would be inevitable for us to find aliens at that point, I guess. But I'm just not there yet, and I think most people aren't there yet. But we could be there. So anyway,
I'll be so annoyed if I die before that happens.
Yeah, thanks so much, Daniel, for calling in. I appreciate you dropping by onto Truth Wanted. Yes, and I hope you continue to watch this show. You should watch AXP too, but we got our own little thing going on.
This one's definitely better.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We had some another caller here, I think, who dropped down here. But if you're still waiting on the call, we'll get to you. We just got some other calls that we want to get to as well. So next, I want to go to Zack, who is calling in from the UK. Zack, what's going on?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me clearly?
Hi.
Can hear you just fine. What's going on tonight?
I was just curious about the word truth. Is that referring to only things we can experiment and test, or does that include beliefs too?
That's a great question. A truth is just whatever you think truth is. Like when I posit Truth Wanted, I want to know what you think is true and what that means to you. Like how is that meaningful to you? Because I can give you my definition of what I think is a good truth definition. I'm sure Katie could give hers, but ultimately, we want to hear from the callers. We want to know what's up. So.
I think there's two distinctions between truth in terms of what is known and what is believed to be true. So as a theist, I know things to be true, and I also believe things to be true. So I just wanted to know whether you thought the same way, basically.
Well, to know things to be true and to believe things to be true, I don't know if I necessarily make that distinction. Like,
how can you know that you know something? Like if you look, the classic is if you look at the clock and it says 2:30, and it is 2:30, but the clock is broken and it's just said 2:30 for 10 years. Did you know it was 2:30? Like, do you know that, or do you just? I
think I can believe that I know something, but I don't know if I can know that I know something. Yeah.
Yeah, if we're talking about truth in the experience sense, then I think belief becomes unnecessary, doesn't it? Or am I?
Truth in the experience sense. What do you mean?
So, like, for example, eating an orange. I'm experiencing it. I'm tasting it. I'm holding it. I know I'm eating an orange. So if we classify truth as experience, doesn't belief become unnecessary from an atheistic perspective?
Maybe, but experiences can also tell us false information, right?
You could dream about eating an orange and at the time not know that you're dreaming.
Yeah.
Everyone has dreams where they don't know they're dreaming. And if your memories and thoughts and everything are just a chemical process in your brain, then potentially in the future we could just inject them, and you could just tell someone they were eating an orange when they weren't. Also, you could be eating like.
So then, what would? Yeah. Sorry. So then, what would be truth then if we can't really know anything? How would you define truth?
What a great question. Like, literally, philosophers way smarter than me have been asking this for thousands of years, and people have given, really concrete and nominally different, and more than nominally, I'm sorry, very, very different ideas of truth and what truth really means. I mean, we could talk about these different theories of truth. We can get into like the nitty gritty of things. But at the end of the day, for myself, I realize I'm a human being on this earth who has to navigate day-to-day life, and I can't like philosophically analyze every single input that comes into my day with the absolute most Pyrrhonic scrutiny possible. And sometimes I have to, go about my time without maybe saying that I know something is true 100%, but still acting on that belief, And so what I would say is, a true thing is something that can match with your experiences, but also is something that can be validated through some sort of reliable process or some sort of reliable mechanism. Okay. And so like, we always talk about gravity, like I can make predictions with gravity. And so I tentatively call the theories that we understand about gravity to be true, with the caveat of knowing that could be updated and changed. But the important thing in that, I think, is having a method by which that information can be changed.
It gives you a confidence level, doesn't it?
Yeah. So
you can be a lot more confident about that than something with less.
Exactly. Working with some sort of confidence interval of some kind to figure out what's true and what's not, and knowing what I know about how the world works, or at least how I understand the world to work, right? We can actually make predictions with the physical processes we know. We can know that the sun is going to come up at a certain time tomorrow. We can know that a comet is going to come by at a certain time because we have these understandings of physics, and we can make predictions based off these kinds of, again, going back to these inputs and outputs. So that's kind of how I see things. I know that's probably a roundabout way of saying it. I'd probably say something maybe slightly different if I was writing stuff down and not on a call-in show, but like, that's kind of my baseline understanding of how I can understand something to be true. What do you think about that, Zach?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think people have different approaches when it comes to truth. Like I said, I mean, as a theist, I think there are rational arguments for why I can believe something to be true. Mm-hmm. But these conversations always confuse me because from an atheist perspective, it's about not believing in a God. But if truth is what we experience, then belief or non-belief becomes irrelevant or obsolete, if you see what I'm saying, because all we're looking for is testable, physical, empirical evidence in that sense. So, yeah.
Sure, but well, our beliefs about that empirical evidence is still a belief. You see what I mean? Like, we can still evaluate something empirically and still recognize. See, this is kind of the difference between the kind of empiricist movements of like the early 20th century and whatnot, and why we kind of don't think about things in those kinds of absolute terms, because we recognize that, yes, even though we're using machines and fine tools to kind of give us this information, that information is still being given to us through our eyes or being given to us through our ears, and we're still kind of sensing it as human beings. So that's why I do frame this kind of idea of knowledge still under the umbrella of belief, because it is belief. You can still have belief that you have the knowledge. It all comes back to belief, I think.
There are people who are like 100% are certain that they have experienced something. Like, for example, like the last caller was saying, there are people who are 100% certain that they have experienced an alien abduction, and they know that. They know it's true. But do they? Like, I mean, we can't say for certain that they're wrong, but there's no evidence at all for it. It seems really unlikely.
At least evidence that we would find acceptable enough for us to change our belief, right?
And I do think, like, both talking about aliens and God, if something happened to me where I was convinced I had talked to God or been abducted by aliens or anything, like, that would convince me. I mean, I'm sure I could be convinced of both of those things if it just happened in front of me. If I just saw it, I mean, I'd probably, even if it was irrational, I'd just take it. But then I couldn't. There's no one who I could convince of that. And then what's the difference between me, who I know is sane, and someone who is like totally not sane?
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Zach, what do you think?
Would you consider? Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, would you consider rationality to be truth? Or
I think rationality refers to using systems of logic. I don't necessarily equate that to truth, though. I don't think they're quite the same thing.
I think if you start with some premises like A can't equal not A, then you can say A doesn't equal not A, and that's true. But you still have there's some underlying premises to logic. But once you start off with very few premises to logic, there are lots of things you can say are objectively true given the premises. And in that case, like you can say someone is being rational or not. You can say objectively this is rational because you have said A equals not A, and we both have these premises.
Yeah, I think what I mean by true in that sense is it makes sense, right? It makes sense logically. And would that be sufficient for you to accept something to be true, as in a belief? If something made sense, would you then accept it?
There's loads of things you can construct whole kind of belief systems which all add up, but they're just false.
Yeah, absolutely. Like something can definitely make sense to one person, but not make sense to another person.
Or even it could make sense to everyone. Like I could create a fictional world that is perfectly logical and rational, but I've just made it up. I mean, that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but if something made sense, would that be enough to accept it as true, as a belief?
No, because there are things that you can come up with something that's totally convincing. That's absolute bullshit. You totally can't. Like you could hey, the sun revolves around the earth, and you can tell because you can see the sun doing it all the time. You see it moving in the sky, and it goes down, and then it comes back on the other side. So therefore, the sun moves around the earth. I mean, intuitively, that makes sense. As if you're a kid and you don't know anything, it made sense for most people for a long time until we figured out, hey, that's not the case. So yeah, it has to be more than just making sense for sure.
I think making sense is a prerequisite for believing something. If it doesn't make sense, you can't believe it. But if it does make sense, then you can believe it. That doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if personal incredulity actually matters to truth either, though. But I think Zach wanted to say something.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean with the sun and that, I think that's already been tested, right? But when I think when it comes to God, when I observe when I observe Earth and nature, and I see it function in a systematic way, do you think it's rational to believe that systems come about through intentionality?
Nope, I have no reason to believe that. I think this kind of argument from nature is something that a lot of people have opined about for a long time, and I can see where that comes from. It's like, look, there's an ecosystem, and this bird eats the worm, but the worm helps decompose this body, and like all these things are kind of make sense, and it looks designed, on an intuitive level. It's like, wow, there's a method to this madness, but that intuition, I think. It kind of is deceitful to us when you kind of have an understanding of exactly how these systems came to be. When you can look at this and say, look, we can actually show natural processes by which a lot of these systems came. There's not necessarily a reason to impose a supernatural kind of a conduit to it all.
I kind of disagree with this to an extent in that I just think it doesn't look designed. I just think it's either come about through random chance, or it's like unintelligent design, because it's just a mess. Like the whole world is an absolute mess, and there are so many things, like particularly in like how animals work and just how nature works, where like this happens and it just makes no sense at all, but it just kind of works.
Yeah,
that's if I was designing, I could design humans better than God did. Like hands down, that is a challenge I'm laying down. God.
You make a great point, Katie. You make a great point. It's like, there's actually things that really don't make a lot of sense when we kind of look at the design. Like my eyes, for example, I had to get had a pretty bad cross eye when I was little. I actually had to get surgery when I was like 5 or 6. You know, that was nothing of that I did to do that. I was just kind of born that way. You know, like where there's the design.
Bad design, mate.
Bad design there. I got kind of messed up, but you know.
I know. Well, I've got asthma, and that's a bad design. Like, I could build lungs better than what I've got.
Yeah.
Oh, we couldn't build them. I could design them. I could design them.
Sure. We can 3D print that stuff now, you know? So.
Well, I wouldn't even design lungs, because why the hell do people need oxygen? Like, if I was going to design life, I wouldn't waste time breathing. Not what waste of time.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's true.
Sorry.
That's true too. Yeah, what do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I from my position, I accept the fact that I believe that God didn't create the world and us perfect. So I don't really expect perfection in that sense. But from going back to the systematic sort of line of argument is that we experience or we see systems being formed through intentionality. And I don't think I've ever come across a system with a function that came about without, yeah.
What do you mean by we've seen systems form with intentionality? What do you mean by that?
Like cars, for example, right? Cars are formed. A car is a system, right? So that was made by someone who intended to make a car. An airplane, other animals form other systems, whether it's nests or whatever, right?
Sure.
So these come about through intentionality. Now, when we look at Earth and nature and how it functions, we can acknowledge that it's a system, right?
Sure, but let me ask you this, Zach: what would a system without intentionality look like?
I don't know. I haven't witnessed one. That's the whole point.
How do you know you haven't? How do you haven't witnessed one? Yeah.
What's the difference?
Because every system I've come across came about through someone intending it to be a system. Someone intended to be a system with a certain function.
We just talked about the Earth, right? Have you seen someone design that?
What? Like,
no,
why?
But that's why I come.
So again.
No, but that's why I come to a rational conclusion that it was intended.
So what's happening is, it sounds like you've seen systems that are designed, like cars are designed from people, right? Nests are designed from birds, right? And you're extrapolating that inference by saying, well, these things are designed, therefore these other things must be designed. And that's where Katie and I might disagree.
No, I'm not using the word designed. I'm using the word system. Like it's things working together to serve a purpose, right? So looking at,
I don't see how that makes a difference, because
right?
You're saying it's designed, right? Like that's your point.
Oh, I know. I'm saying it's intended, right? So I'm saying systems come about through intentionality, because
so it's through intentionality,
right?
There are a lot of things though that, in order, like when you look at something like a car and it drives from A to B, like it does what it's like supposed to, and you can say, oh, that makes sense because people want to get from A to B and they've designed a thing to do it and stuff. But there are all kinds of weird things that, like, animals are very easy to look at. Like an example, I've just been trying to think of something. With cats, when you stroke their back near the tail, they often arch their back up. Just push themselves up. And when they're kittens, that makes sense because their mum wants to get them to stand up and stretch their legs so they can lick them all better and stuff. But adult cats still do it. Like, that's a system in a very, like, vague sense. Mm-hmm. It's like a reaction. It's like in the vaguest sense, everything is a system. This is a system. Like, why? What? Why would you say that is designed? It's just something that happens.
Or has intentionality.
There are loads of, it's an irrational reaction. And humans do all kinds of irrational things. Like, why are you scared of spiders if you live in the UK? There's not a single spider in the UK that can hurt you, unless you read the Daily Mail. And why would you be scared of them? But it's like a system, isn't it? It's a thing that people have. And so somewhat you're saying someone designed that. Someone designed humans to have a natural phobia of spiders. I don't know. It's irrational. Why? Sorry, I'm not being confrontational.
I think fear is... Oh no, I think fear is just part of our nature. I mean,
But there's rational fear and there's irrational fear. Like it's rational for me to be scared of a tiger. It is not it's not rational for me to be scared of a slow worm. But people are scared of slow worms. Some people. And that's like a system. It's built in. It's part of humans, isn't it? And either we're saying humans naturally have some kind of predisposition to being afraid of slow worms because they look a bit like snakes, and some snakes are poisonous and like are venomous. Some snakes are poisonous too, and that gives them some kind of evolutionary advantage. Or we're saying someone designed humans to be afraid of something that can't hurt them. Like why does that look designed to you? Why does it?
Well, it looks well. It has a function to it, right? It serves a purpose, right?
There's no purpose for anyone on Earth being scared of a slow worm. They're not even snakes. They're lizards. Like if we should be able to just look at them and be like, oh, it's a lizard, and not. It's not an issue. It's not an adder. In the UK, there's only one snake that can hurt you, or two maybe. But like, why is there fear? People have a fear of like house spiders, and it's just a fact they can't hurt you. Someone designed that.
I don't know. Maybe we'd have to look into each individual's case to see why they actually. Maybe they were frightened from a young age. I don't know. Maybe they were
possibly. But if you're frightened from a young age, that's also a system. Like if you're frightened from a young age and then you carry that through to adulthood, that's a system.
I want to get to some other comments here, but I want to give Zack a chance to kind of respond and kind of give his piece.
Yeah, I mean, just to close out, basically, yeah, I mean, I was just trying to call in and give my thoughts on how I view systems and how systems have functions and how those functions benefit, what those functions were, who those systems were intended for. So, and looking at nature and how we benefit. Yeah.
I'll say this, Zack. I can definitely look at systems that benefit people that have that intentionality to it, right? There's a purpose to those systems, but I also see lots of systems that seem purposeless. And I understand that just because I can't figure out the purpose of it doesn't mean that it doesn't have one. But in the same way that if I look at an entire system and say, well, I can infer because there's some of this that looks designed, maybe the rest of this is designed. I can't infer purpose to all systems just because some of it looks like it does have a purpose. Like I understand there are some things that have a purpose, but I believe it's there because like evolution, put that there, not necessarily that there was there's a difference between how I think that thing came here, probably from what you might imagine, but I don't know. We could go a bit more into it, and I'd love to explore this with you more. Sorry, we can't go into it more. We got some other callers we got to get to, but Zack, this is a good call to get into, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface of some of your beliefs. So I'd love to talk to you about it more because this has been a great conversation so far.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a great night and good night because you were calling in from the UK, and I'm sure it's just as late over there as it is for Katie.
Yeah, it's quite late.
Right, that was a call I really wish we could really dig into and go more because I feel like we were really onto something there. This is very good. Zack was very responsive to some of our questions and stuff. I wish we could kind of prod at that a little more, but we got some other callers. I don't want to talk to everybody before we go here. I don't want to, this isn't going to be just a one-man show. So let's try to get to these last 3 more calls here, and then we'll probably wrap it up for the night here. So if you're on the line, just go ahead and stay on, and we will get to you. Next, I want to get to Tim, who is calling in from Phoenix, Arizona. Tim, what's going on?
Hi, Katie and Dan. I wanted to jump in on a conversation you were having earlier about what's happening in the U.S. as laws pertain to LGBTQ and also how it brings in single women and Jewish people.
Ooh, do tell.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So Mike Pence is a big reason that Trump got voted in, and his people are evangelical Christians, and they're often called Christian nationalists because they really believe that we should only take care of our own country. And they also believe that the country was founded on the Christian religion. Now, of course, that's been denied all over the place. But unfortunately, with Trump and Pence coming into power, they have dragged these people along with them very willingly. And these people have been working on laws against LGBTQs for quite a while. It's just gotten a lot worse under Trump and Pence and continues to be so. Can I give you an example or two?
I think we could probably both think of some examples, but if you want to give some for the audience, then yeah, go ahead and give one.
Okay. Right now, going in front of our SCOTUS, we have a suit that would allow companies to fire someone based on their sexuality if their sexuality went against the owner of the business's religious beliefs.
Yeah, this one's terrifying. It's
Yeah.
really scary. And it's not just that.
Yeah.
There's like a mess of things. So they want to be able to fire people for having a different sexuality, and also just for being trans, and also for wearing the wrong clothes, which is they've wrapped up into the trans thing. So like it could potentially be pushed as far as women wearing trousers. So
yeah. In fact, the lawsuit that's in front of the SCOTUS right now is because a person changed their gender while they worked for a company, and the company fired them for that, even though they had a great record.
And it's even sadder than that, because she was fired and then had to have legal costs and didn't have an income, and also has diabetes, and you don't have state healthcare there. So she's died this week of diabetes. Because she didn't have enough money to pay for the treatment. It's horrific. Full stop. Horrific. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Karen.
So one other point that I think is really massive that people are missing is, and I'm not talking about the Catholic Church per se, I'm talking about the Catholic social missions. So we're talking adoption, we're talking homeless shelters, we are talking a large percentage of hospitals run by Catholics in the United States. And their ability to use taxpayer money, so, you know, they get some of my taxes to run these social programs, but they also get to discriminate against me, even in a hospital as a gay man. They can discriminate against a woman for having an abortion or asking for any type of abortion pill or birth control. And it goes on from there. Basically, within their services, if they don't like you, they don't have to give you that service that they are offering, even though our taxpayer money goes for it.
Yes.
So,
so
in Dallas right now, they're working on it where a doctor could refuse anyone because they were gay if it went against their religion. So we are really up against the fight of our lives. I might sound dramatic over this.
No, it is. I agree.
No, and you're right, Tim. And, you know, I said, you know, earlier I was saying, yeah, public opinion about LGBT people has shifted over the years. And that's a positive thing. And that's true. We can look at that and see that that's true. But that doesn't mean that the fight is over, right? That doesn't mean that we're all done and we can just pack our bags and go home. Like, these issues are still real. And progress, you know, I think we make the mistake that progress is a guarantee. It's not. It's not a linear function. You know, progress only happens when we decide to make it happen. And as soon as we decide to stop fighting for that, then we lose that, you know? So yeah, I agree with you, Tim. It's something that we have to really keep in mind. And it's something that we have to remind people, like, hey, this is still important to talk about. Let's not forget about this, because there's active legal issues going on right now, as you've pointed out, that are happening.
I think with any kind of progress, there's always backlash. I think that, like, particularly in the UK, we're seeing that with trans rights, and I guess it's what you're seeing there with LGBT rights in general, and also women's rights, is that we as people, humans, have made progress.
And check this out, and Tim, I'll let you talk. I'll let you say this too, but like, check this out too, because we have legal protections for gender and for race across all states, and in some places we even have it for sexual orientation, and in some other places, and things like that, and identity. But even with those legal protections, that doesn't mean people aren't firing people for their race or aren't firing people for their gender. Because how hard is it to defend that legally? Well, how do you prove that? Like what conversations that you may have had? Oh, do you record everything everywhere you go? Do you have written statements from people? Like it's so hard for the average person to even demonstrate that to be true. So I've
got so many friends who were like the top of their company, and then they came out, and all of a sudden they were the bottom of their company. They didn't change their behavior at all. They just suddenly got bad progress reviews, and then they lose their job. Yeah. And they lost the job for being bad, but they weren't bad. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Well, you look at the changes over the decades of how people can be fired to literally now when you get hired, you have to sign a paper that says, basically, we can fire you for any reason. So it is much harder. There are some cases, in this one case that is going to the Supreme Court, is based on that. And the reason it's been so hard is because it's really difficult to prove. This one was a little more obvious with the change in sex, that obviously it was a physical change and easier to see and easier to pinpoint when the changes of the way the employee was treated happened. But it's scary. And it's even one other thing that I'll point out where, I mentioned 3 different groups being discriminated against, and that's the Catholic adoption agency services, where trans people or any LGBTQ single women and Jewish people have all been turned down from adopting children because they didn't match the Catholic ideal.
Which is like, the one thing that we need more of in this country is people to adopt, in my opinion. And the fact that you deny the select few people that are even able to do that.
If you ask anyone who knows about adoption, then no one is going to say it's better for them to be in some home than it is to be with a loving family. Like, it's always going to be better to be with a loving family, even if they are Jewish. Like,
that's not to say that there aren't disqualifying factors for people who can adopt. I've encountered that, but that's the reasons that they present are absolute bull. And let me make this point as well, because we're talking about the Catholic Church in particular. I understand, because you made this point, that the Catholic Church has provided social services and all kinds of support for groups. Who else has also provided support for local communities? Al-Qaeda, the Yakuza, all kinds of organized groups that have done things for the community. And that's why they do get that local support. Now, again, I'm making an extreme, a comparison, but is it that extreme if we're talking about legally allowing people to discriminate, from their choices just based on political influence in our country? I don't think so. I think if you have an institution as large as the Catholic Church with the money that they do, then sometimes the stuff that they do kind of feels like mob rule, and that's not fair for atheist folks like you or me, or any kind of folks who don't follow those same prescriptions of belief, who have to kind of work under those rules that we don't think are right.
No, thank you for actually bringing that up. I wasn't going that far because I figured people would think I was nuts. Literally, with
I'll do that for you, Tim. I'll do it for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that's why, as a gay man, I'm afraid. And I've never been afraid before. And I know I'm not alone. And, anybody, people of color, it's just come down to, if you're white and Christian and heterosexual, you're beginning to be favored.
Yeah, I feel it. I empathize. I've never felt more like afraid of losing rights in my life.
You know what happened with me? One of the first privileges I've lost was the transition from Christianity to kind of being the atheist that I am now. I lost a privilege, and that privilege was the ability to talk about my beliefs without people looking at me funny. Nobody looks at you funny if you say you believe in Jesus around here. That's just the thing.
That's
you
so
say you
different here.
You say you
So
don't
different.
believe around here, and sometimes people give you the stink eye. I mean, it's really different, you know. Like I lost that, and just being in support of LGBT people can sometimes be a disqualifying thing for friendship. Like if I hear people talk about trans people in ways that I find to be deplorable, I try to point that out as best as I can. Say like, hey, this isn't a good thing for you to say, and that costs friendships sometimes, so that can cost social relationships, but I have to do that because I feel compelled to. So yeah, I know I can at least relate in that small regard, Tim, that I understand what it, you know, that it's people who are privileged who don't go through those experiences just cannot relate anymore. And I cannot relate to being a gay person or anybody in the LGBT community because I don't have those experiences, but I at least lost a little bit of my own privilege, and I wish other people lost a little bit of their own privilege to kind of get that experience too, so they can understand.
I think that's it'd be great if everyone understood it, but at the same time, rather than wishing a loss of privilege on other people, it'd be wish that everyone else didn't lose privilege. Perhaps.
I honestly think some people are so hard-headed that you can be completely reasonable with them, and they're not going to understand till they just
for sure they need
themselves.
to experience.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't mean to wish harm on people.
I understand.
It's just some people are just so hard-headed. It's like a Christmas story, not a Christmas story. What's the one with
the Muppets Christmas Carol?
The Christmas Carol. Yes, it's like, look, Ebenezer, he just had to go see those ghosts, man, or else he wasn't gonna, you know, do the thing he did in that.
Buy a turkey on Christmas Day.
Help out little Tim, I think is his name.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's what I think. But anyway, Tim, not you, Tim, the different Tim. I think there was a Tim in that story. But anyway,
Tiny Tim.
Tiny Tim. That's what it is. Tiny Tim. Thank you. But Tim, thanks for calling in and sharing some of your experiences. I'm glad I'm glad Truth Wanted can be an outlet for you to give out some of your concerns and let other people know what's on your mind and what you think other people should think about. Because I agree, this stuff's important, man. And I, I'll keep talking about it until we make the changes we want to see happen, right?
That's why I appreciate your show.
Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate you calling in, and I hope to hear from you again some other time. Yeah, it is what it is. We just got to keep fighting the good fight until we make stuff happen. And it may never stop. Like it may be something that we have to do for the rest of our lives. I don't know.
So I think about something like being left-handed. Like there are places now on Earth where being left-handed is still a thing. Like people care about, and in history, like in the whole of Europe, being left-handed was a serious issue. And now, at least in the UK, at least where I live, no one cares at all.
Sure.
It's as interesting as your hair color, or maybe even less interesting than your hair color, is whether you're right or left-handed. And some things can disappear from public.
We will hopefully see the same for LGBT people.
I mean, it's effectively the same in that you're born it. And
I know it is like on a philosophical level. I mean socially, right? Like
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, hopefully we can get there because we've had another example of people being wrong and now they're just normal. And why can't we do it again?
Why can't we do it again?
It's a long fight, and like there are still places where being left-handed is an issue. And how many thousands of years have we had left-handed people?
Yeah, exactly. I want to get to the last two callers here. So both of you two callers, stay on the line. First, I'm going to get to Nick, who's calling in here. Hey, Nick, what's going on?
Hey, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I'm having a good time here with Katie, just talking to callers. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'm just going to get quick into my question.
Let's do it.
So basically, I'm an atheist and my mom is Catholic. I've tried to challenge her beliefs, but, it's kind of her religion is a personal thing for her, and I don't want to take it away because it's not hurting anybody. But I think it was 2 days ago, my mom got a message from her friend, and it was one of those 5G conspiracy, 5G is going to kill us all or whatnot.
Telling everyone trans.
To explain to her. yeah, I tried to explain to her that it was basically pseudoscience and explain to her like the electromagnetic spectrum and all that and non-ionizing radiation. But one thing she told me that kind of struck with me is she said, well, you should just let other people have their own opinions. And I said to her, well, what if those opinions are damaging to society and damaging to other people? And she said, well, yeah, but you should still let other people have their own opinions. So I just wanted to kind of ask, well, what do you think would convince somebody to not hold on to that anymore? Because I also noticed that she was like making an appeal to authority saying, oh, my friend sent me this, so it must be true type of thing. But I just wanted to know what both of your thoughts were on that.
Yeah.
I encounter this, like, I'm entitled to an opinion thing so much. Like on Twitter, people say it literally every day. And it's almost like a meme where people say what they're saying is, oh, everyone deserves an opinion. And that's true. I don't have any right to take away your thoughts. But what they're meaning is my opinion is equal, back off. And I think it's important to assert, like, yeah, you are allowed to think whatever you want. And I would fight for, like, if we had thought police, that'd be horrific. However, some opinions are trash. Like, some opinions are worthless. Some people have opinions that are logically contradictory. And I'm not like taking away your right to tell you your opinion is wrong. Like, there are some opinions that are bad. Anyone who is a racist, their opinion is wrong. I mean, and I think sometimes you can explain to people that sometimes if they've got this thing in their mind, like, oh, well, it's my opinion, and it gives them a defense. Like, they become defensive over it. You're saying that I can't have an opinion? And like, no, mate, you can have any opinion you want, but just look, let's find something that we agree on, which is an opinion that other people have that's wrong. Yeah. And you can say they deserve to have an opinion, but they don't deserve to be able to say that without people telling them they're wrong. Because it's rubbish.
It's not invalid. So, everybody has the freedom of autonomy and the freedom to think their own thoughts. I think you and I would both agree with that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean every single opinion is on equal playing field. Okay. 3-year-olds have opinions on all kinds of things. That doesn't mean we should make our public policy based on, what a 3-year-old is feeling when they're cranky during nap time. You know what I mean? Like that. We have to take opinions into context. Some opinions are based on research. Some opinions are based on experiences. Some opinions are based on a context of array of information. And we can look at which information is more reliable and which information is going to give us the kind of results that we would want to see, a more solid foundation for our understanding of how the world works than others. I have a lot of opinions, some of which I express on this show, but I try to always at least ground the way I think about things in some sort of justification beyond, well, I had this thing happen to me one time, so I think everything's like this. Or, yeah, I think I saw a news article about it one time or something. Actually, sometimes I will say I read a news article about it. But like, if I know the source off the top of my head, I'll tell you where to go, and some people, but that's a trained thing for me because I'm surrounded by other people who do that all the time. If you don't have people in your life that challenge you that way, then you don't start to think that way. So that's where I think you come in, Nick. I think your ability to challenge your family, because you are their family, means that you have an open invitation to have conversations with them much better than I could. I can't call up your mom and say, hey, what's up? I think your opinion is wrong.
I'll do it. Give me a number.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. If she calls in, I'll talk to her all day. But your opinion matters too. Her opinion matters, but your opinion matters too. And we can suss out some information there. We can suss out why you believe the way that you do. And maybe if you explain why you believe the way that you do, they can see why you do. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think sorry.
Nick, what do you think?
I completely agree with that. And maybe I was coming off a bit forceful because I was really passionate about the whole thing, because I just realize it for what it is. And I don't want to have people like my mom lured in by misinformation. So I guess what I can do is just try and give her some epistemic grounding and try and reason with her, that my opinion, I can back it up and you can have your own opinion on it. But, I just want to give you my thoughts.
I think
Sure.
give her the tools, give her the tools to understand. Like when someone is set in this, like everyone has their own opinion and they're all valid mindset, they don't necessarily know that's not the only mindset. And if you can explain to her, like, here's an opinion that someone else has that's just rubbish, like maybe you can then think, oh, what if some of my opinions are rubbish? What if some of my friends' opinions are rubbish? Like having the tools to think is important.
My advice too, Nick, would be, hey, leave your opinion out of it for right now. Focus entirely on her opinion and try to see how much you can talk to her without even saying what you think about things. I had this great professor in college. I took this media literacy course, and he was one of the best professors I ever had, in the sense that I never knew what his opinion was on anything unless I asked him or somebody else asked him. He was so great at explaining information in such a descriptive way. And it made sense. He used to work for a news organization, right? So he's used to people writing stories and kind of being as objective as possible and stuff. So he was able to deliver this information in such a way where, like, I didn't know his political leanings too much. I didn't understand too much what went on behind it, because he was just giving, what he read and what he knew, or what at least he thought he knew, based on information given. There wasn't a hint of personal bias in there really too much anywhere. And so that's what I try to model when I talk, because that had an influence on me. That helped me think about things better. And I would suggest the same thing with you, Nick. If you can talk to your mom just about her opinion as much as you can, without even getting yourself into it, she might be more responsive to that and not feel like she has to defend herself, versus your opinion, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, sounds like we got to the heart of that question. I appreciate you being quick to your question and us getting right to the answer as we're getting to the tail end of the show here. So thanks for that, Nick.
Yeah, I'm just going to probably go with the street epistemology approach then.
I agree. That's a pretty good one. I say stick to that. And Nick, I wish you luck with.
Hello? 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 Hey, can you hear me?
What's going on?
Hey, my question is for Katie. So I was curious how you would approach conversation. How you would approach a conversation with someone who has transphobic views that are rooted in religious views or other views that you might not be prepared to unravel at that point in time, right? Where do you sort of begin?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think sometimes when someone is like LGBT phobic or specifically transphobic, and there's some kind of grounding in religion, you don't want your conversation of stop treating this person differently to end up in does God exist? Because it's a whole huge mess to unravel. I think it depends what religion, but generally, to an extent here, it's a bit easier for trans people than with talking about gay rights, is that some religions, like Christianity, in the holy text, it says some kind of comment about gay people. For example, in Christianity, again, there is just no comment on trans people. And I think that before, when I've had success, I've said to a religious person who has been perhaps of an Abrahamic religion, I'll say, your holy text doesn't mention trans people. It's just not in there. There's no guidance on it at all. You can do the generic like love angle, like, there are things in your text to say love other people as they are. Yeah. And then my final point would be that God, like what I usually say to people, like as an atheist, but like posing to them is, God creates everyone with their own challenges, and most religious people accept that. There are some people who have some challenges and some people have some others, but God creates you who you are, and God has created example, me, God created me as a trans woman, and he has given me the challenge of transitioning. And it's an emotional challenge. It's a spiritual challenge. It's all the challenges. And I think that often people have this kind of idea that like, oh, God doesn't make mistakes. And like, I'm not saying God makes mistakes. I'm saying God has chosen this for me. And it's just a normal path. And you know, he's given me this spirit or this soul or whatever they believe in. And I think that often when people realize there's no strict rule against it, and there's some kind of rationalization for it, and then a natural just inclination to be nice to people. Most people are just nice. I think it benefits once they've met a trans person as well. Yeah, they're less likely to gut react. Religion says no.
Yeah,
What I add is, you know, Katie did mention that, again, the Bible doesn't specifically say anything about trans people. There are some people who will say that there are references to it, and there's a couple examples that come to mind where it doesn't exclusively fall into that category. One of them is an Old Testament passage, specifically, I believe it's in Leviticus, that talks about basically saying men can't wear kind of women's clothing, and I think vice versa too as well. I can't think of it specifically, but that's not saying anything about trans people. That's saying someone identifying as one can't wear the clothing of identifying as another. But if you're a trans woman, you already identify as the other, you know, gender. So that doesn't.
When I've encountered people who have said this to me before, and I've managed to win them over. Pretty much, I mean, it is a bit of just like a linguistic dodge in a sense, but it's kind of the level you're dealing with it at. It says here, men can't wear women's clothes, and be like, but I'm not a man.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, there are people, they may, you know, if they've got a gut reaction, if it's a bit more deep rooted than just their religion, then they'll come up with some other arguments, and you can have a non-religious argument. But if they're having a religious argument,
the pushback that I normally hear is, and it's absolutely horrible, and I hate to repeat it, is they tend to push back with, oh, well, it's just a mental disorder or something along those lines, and I don't have have enough armament to really fight back against, you know, something that unfounded.
You asked the right person.
You should follow me on Twitter.
Exactly.
This is a classic. There's a few classic arguments. One is it's a mental illness. And there's a few layers to this. Firstly, it's not a mental illness. If you talk to any experts, if you ask any of the like major organizations like WPATH, World something transgender, I don't know, the World Health Organization, the UK's NHS, like all of the major health organizations just say it's not a mental illness. It's not a mental illness to be trans. And then the next thing is, if it was a mental illness, that doesn't mean that it's insanity. Like often people use mental illness and insanity. Like when I say insanity, I mean like unaware of the surroundings, saying nonsense. Like, you know, the stereotype. They often use them interchangeably, but like arachnophobia is like a mental illness, and like, you know, depression is a mental illness. And
that doesn't mean it's not real.
It doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you should get treatment. People with mental illnesses deserve treatment.
And it doesn't mean that you should discriminate against someone for it.
It doesn't mean they should be discriminated. It doesn't mean you shouldn't believe them as well. Like a depressed person is still able to do their job. They're still able to have friends. They're still able to enjoy their life in a lot of cases. There's nothing about them which makes them an irrational, unreasonable, unbelievable person. It's just they have a condition. So I think there's two parts. One, I always lead with, it's just not a mental illness. That's factually false. There's a really good, you know, the Principal Skinner meme, like, maybe everyone else is wrong. Actually, it's me. There's a good one for if you Google that, it's like this huge list. It's the list of all the health organizations which say being trans isn't a mental illness, and it's like all of them. Or maybe I'm wrong.
It's
just a misconception.
If being transgender is a mental illness, then me presenting as a man would also be a mental illness. You see what I'm saying? Like,
I think we all agree that being a cis man is a mental illness.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Like, but you know, the idea is just like how much of this, and people really don't make the distinction between social constructs and you know everything else, but and also okay, this is a side note to a side note. Just because something's a social construct doesn't mean it's not real either. Like money is fucking real, okay? Like we use that shit every day, but it's also like not real at the same time. Like it's kind of has these qualities to it that make it, obviously this social construct, this idea that I hand you this paper and that's worth something to you, that even though, the paper itself isn't going to do anything, but it's meaningful to you in some way. And so the way that I was just gonna say the way that we present ourselves as our genders is meaningful to us in some sort of way. That's why we do make these distinctions, but it's just not as tangible as some other things we might point to.
The only reason to classify something like as a mental illness really is to provide some kind of treatment. Like there are all kinds of bodily conditions that you can have. Like if you graze your finger, you don't need to call it a medical condition because you don't really need any treatment. Whereas if you break your hand, like smash it, then it's a condition and it's worth labeling because we know things with this label benefit from this treatment. It's part of the diagnosis process. And it doesn't make any sense to call this thing a mental illness because it doesn't benefit from these types of treatments. It does make sense to call these things, but a mental illness because it does benefit from these treatments. But that doesn't mean that it then means you're incapable of doing your job or incapable of knowing who you are.
Yeah, for sure.
It is a social construct. It's a meaningful social construct. But yeah, if you ever need to do I'm gonna slightly self-plug here. If you ever need to do some kind of standard trans argument, hit me up on Twitter. DMs are open. Lots of these are just every single day. Someone tells me being trans is a mental illness once every 6 hours. So
is that helpful, Kyle?
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, that was super helpful. Thank you.
It's like someone telling me that the world is flat every 6 hours. I'm like, okay, here we go again. No, if it's it's just incorrect. And that's people who don't know.
Yeah, and to deal with the bullshit, it takes orders of magnitude more patience than being able to produce it,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's an undue burden on Katie that she has to explain herself to people as well. I think that's bullshit too, which is why I think it's good for people like you and me, Kyle, who can talk about this as well. And stuff. We can be good allies to folks, and we can kind of and point to the right people when we need to, when something is outside of our scope. So, yeah, for sure. Well, Kyle, hopefully that was helpful. Sounds like it was. Thanks for calling in tonight. Really do appreciate the call. And there was one other call. I'm sorry we can't quite get to you tonight, but we are going to go on Discord in just a second. So if you had more questions for Katie, and you want to talk to her right now or talk to me, we're going to go onto the Atheist Community of Austin Discord. Links for that are in the description. It's something that we do every single week. We kind of do a little after show where you get to hang out with us and talk about fun stuff. But before we head over to the Discord, Katie, if people want to find you, where should they go?
Go to Twitter and just type in dickhead. No, go to search for @Katy Montgomerie. And it's spelled the opposite to what you think. It's Katy, and Montgomerie is Montgomerie. So I've got them the wrong way around. I'm also in the same thing on YouTube, and I'm also on Instagram if you want to look at photos.
There you go. And if you want to find me, if you're watching for the first time, again, this is Truth Wanted. We have a YouTube channel, but we're also on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else you get your podcasts and stuff. You can follow me on Twitter @ObjectivelyDan, or you can email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.org. I read all of those emails, and I try to respond to everything. I love it when you guys write. It's the best thing ever. And there's also ways you can support the show. You can go on patreon.com/truthwanted. And support the show on there. And you can also get merch. We have a store for that. Go to the link in the description.
Proper sexy hoodies.
Now, I would be remiss if I did not forgot to thank the wonderful crew that helps make this
Thank you.
That's all the plugs that I have. Katie, what's one thing you want to say to the world before we head out of here?
Aphids can both sexually and asexually reproduce, and they can actually give live birth to pregnant babies, which are pregnant with clones of themselves.
That is the most perfect thing you could have possibly said to end this episode, and I'm so glad you got to do it. Thanks again, everybody, for watching Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.